Welcome to The Music Reel. I'm your host, Nicola Burton, and today I am so happy to be speaking to Bec Scott. Now, Bec is the co-founder and the CEO for STREAT. Bec, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. How are you going?
Pleasure. Oh, look, crazy like everyone else in the middle of stage 4 lockdown. We're all doing what we can, aren't we? You know, we're all finding kind of little ways to stay safe and sane.
We are. Now, look, you are a very interesting person. I saw this great quote that you said where you can actually make changes by changing your purchasing habits. Now, for me, if there's a blueprint for the world in terms of recovery, I'd say you've probably already bloody developed the template by the look at all the things that you do. So I want to start with STREAT, which is this extraordinary enterprise. So I'd love to hear about what it does, how it came about, and of course, how you guys are going in the pandemic down in Melbourne with your lockdowns.
Oh, look, it'd be fair to say that we're from an industry perspective and from the perspective of our, training programs with young people, obviously, it's a tough time at the moment where, we're in Melbourne in stage 4 lockdown running a whole portfolio of hospitality businesses. So, there's a lot of stuff that's not open and there's some real challenges there. But also, I guess the flip side of that is that, I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs will always look for silver linings and opportunities out of crisis. And one of the things that I'm a passionate greenie and advocate for massive change that we need to make in climate change. And actually, if I think about we've given the climate a deep breath. Actually, this pandemic, some of the things that I've been working towards are those kind of longer term, more systemic changes that needed to happen anyway. So some of the positivities that have kind of come out of this pandemic, I think, were well overdue.
I agree. And it's almost like, we've stopped. Business has been interrupted. And so maybe this is an opportunity. As you said, you had this vision for every business to become a social enterprise. It's almost like we now actually have the opportunity to do that. So for any business that's wanting to bring your vision to life, what kind of things can you recommend? What wisdom can you share with them about taking the first few steps? Because it seems like it's quite overwhelming. What sort of recommendations can you make for them to be the change they'd like to see in their own business?
It's interesting, actually, because I've had a couple of for-profit businesses approach us during this pandemic and say, hey, we're kind of looking at this social enterprise stuff quite seriously. We were already very much trying to think about the social and environmental impact that we could do, but actually, the sort of making it the core of our mission is more and more attractive. And so I do think what's happened, a lot of people have really been grappling, not just obviously how do we survive as organisations during this pandemic, but how do we align, the values of our staff and our people with the values of the organisation more strongly, and actually how do we use this level of disruption to get on and do a bunch of the changes in our organisations that we needed to. And so if I think even about, some of the organisations that we're working closely with, if your core businesses are closed and businesses usually is not looking like it normally is, that's a great opportunity to stand back and say, well, what do we want to look like in a decade or 2 decades time? Let's get to building that now. And I think for many organisations, particularly if their current businesses had really wound down and they were, they've got a bunch of staff who are on JobKeeper, essentially using that JobKeeper, time and money as innovation money, starting to think about, well, how would we make changes now and deploy some of our people into starting to reconfigure things. And that's a really exciting opportunity for organisations. It might start as simply as saying, okay, how are we going to become a deeper shade of green as an organisation? Many organisations will already have a level of things that they're doing environmentally. They'll have some goals. They'll probably, they'll be doing some recycling in the office. They'll be, they'll have some things that they're doing for sure. But that ability to say, well, what would it look like to go really deep green? What are all of those tiny little things that we can do? And just to give you a sense, as an organisation, we did that process last year with our own teams. And we went out to all of our teams and all of our customers and crowdsourced green ideas that they had for taking us deeper green as an organisation. And we had hundreds and hundreds of ideas across our teams, and we just got to work, implementing a bunch of those things. So we've been really sprinting quite hard during this pandemic, taking our own organisation deeper green, even though we were already quite environmentally focused. But all of those things are just great opportunities to do some things differently. And what we've found very much in those organisations that are taking the pandemic time to do that is that I've got highly engaged staff members. We've got staff members from, or more so kind of volunteers from other organisations who aren't working full time in their day jobs in their organisations, and have said, "Hey, I've now got 2 spare days, a week free. Can I come and spend that with you doing, stuff that's social and environmental?" So I think what it's doing is it's really letting lots of people at both an organisational level and a household level rethink about what's important to them.
I love that, because that actually brings me to the next thing. You and your son have developed CRATEFUL.
Yeah.
I saw that. It was so cute because it was grow it, don't throw it. And every kitchen should have that sign perfectly up there. Every office, everyone should have it. So I'd love for you to talk to me about that, and how, I'd love to hear about how people can actually adapt that themselves, because it's such a cool concept.
Look, it's so simple. So my son, Will, he's 12 years old, and through the pandemic, particularly in the school holidays, what we started to do is establish our own bigger, backyard growing. And we're in a tiny little house in inner Melbourne, so we haven't got a great big yard or anything like that. But you can start growing whatever size space you've got. And what we started to say is, well, how would we make it really, really easy for someone who had hardly any space and hardly any money and really didn't know where to start, and they wanted to do kind of really low footprint growing? And we said, well, what would it look like if someone only had enough space to put the equivalent of a milk crate? So a milk crate is 30 centimetres by 30 centimetres. Let's start to just give ourselves an experiment and say, right, how much can you grow in 1 milk crate equivalent? How much can you grow in 2 milk crates? What are the kind of things that you can grow in there? And because we run, obviously, hospitality businesses, we said, what would it take for us to see if we could fully, establish a full kind of backyard garden using only the waste from a cafe? And that led us on a very, very fun journey, and we now are growing enough food in the backyard for one of us, so the equivalent of kind of one adult's full veggie intake for a whole year in 50 milk crates worth. And all we've done, it's just so simple, all we've done is take the 2-litre milk bottles that all cafes are using and discarding at the end of the day, cutting the top off those, putting some holes in the bottom, filling them with some soil. We've made most of our soil from our worm farming system that we set up in the backyard, that not only puts all of our food scraps but also our paper scraps, our cardboard. So our estimates are that you can turn probably between 80 to 90% of a cafe or food business's waste stream into backyard growing. A cafe will have about 60% of its waste stream being organic waste. So all of that precious, nutrition that shouldn't be going into landfill, it certainly should, it can be going across into composting and worm farming. But there's so many things, whether or not it's the containers that, that hospitality, cafes use, but the same with your own household waste. Yeah. If you think about all the number of containers that you're throwing out, whether or not they be plastic yogurt tubs, or whether or not they be margarine containers, or, large tins, all of that can be growing food, can be growing food in it. So we just started collecting everything. All of our egg cartons were how we started to grow all the seedlings. The seedlings then were put into, plastic containers, and now we've got a full system that's growing. And really what it showed us, and our full system was growing off less than 5 days of waste from streets waste stream. So to give you a sense, we go through 30,000 2-litre milk bottles as an organisation each year.
Wow.
Now, if you just think about, that scale. Now, we're just one hospitality organisation.
Wow.
I think we calculated that there's over 300 million milk bottles used in Melbourne alone for all the coffees that we drink. So you just start to think of the scale of the problem, of landfill, and say, actually, how would you not only divert all that from landfill, but how would you put it into, growing food, for a householder, and particularly in an urban environment. So we've written a book. Will and I have we've got a 200-page book on how we've essentially converted what is just all pavement into a growing system just using cafe waste, and we're having loads of fun. Having said that, we're having a few battles with some local possums that are equally loving the fact that we've made an incredible urban food bowl right in our backyard for them.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is just showing people that even if you have your balcony, even if you don't own your land, even if you have just concrete or pavers in your backyard, there is no reason why you can't start growing at least some of your veggies.
It's such a great idea because we're trying to get our music workforce to do gardening, and so many of them have been creating, and it's really helped with their mental health, their physical fitness. They feel so good to be out there in the sunshine, hands and feet in the soil. Yeah. And we live in the inner city of Brisbane with concrete everywhere. So I really loved your idea. So I'm going to get your book and give it a crack, because I think
great.
You're sorting out waste, you're sorting out fitness and health, you're sorting out actually growing food. So you're sort of hitting a few things off at the same time, and it's fun.
And I think what you said then about that mental health aspect of it just can't be underestimated. That the strong research that shows that how connected, or nature connectedness, is so much part of our mental health and well-being. And I think particularly for those who have been in severe lockdowns around the world, that craving of nature. And you can probably see behind me, you might wonder what it is, but you can see behind me on the table what looks like a whole heap of glass bottles. That's actually just all of the avocado seeds from the avocados that we've been eating. We've made. So in fact, I know there's 37. There's 37 avocado seeds there that are all starting to germinate and will all become beautiful little indoor plants. And we can't fit 37 avocado trees, obviously, in our backyard, but you can keep them miniature, and what we've got now will be a whole heap of beautiful indoor plants for. But just, the amount of stuff that you can grow or regrow from your food scraps, that's a really nice example of just a lovely little, bunch of growing that's inside. And every single day, I start each day going and checking to see which of the new little shoots are coming up. And there's just something really, I think, beautiful about when we're connected into seasons, when we see those first little shoots come out of a seed and up through the soil, that joy that you feel. One of the things that we know from research is that when nature connectedness is graphed across our life by year, we start life as children with high levels of nature connectedness. We're outside, we're exploring things. The world is wonderful and magical to us, and all of those tiny little plants are just so much part of our kind of joy in discovering the world. And then we have this incredible dip in our teenage years where the real bottoming out of our nature connectedness happens around 15 and 16. And then gradually, as we get older and older, and particularly as we come back into kind of retirement age, our nature connectedness, as many people start to spend more time outdoors or do more gardening, our nature connectedness goes back up. But I just see all of that big dip as the missing years, the missing years of nature connectedness. And And what would it take for us to have a whole life, whether or not we're in a city or a country, in the country, that's connected to, to the nature around us, and we will be better, not only healthier, obviously healthier, mentally and physically, I think, as a result of that.
And that might be another opportunity for the lockdowns, is that middle part, they've had to work from home. Yes. So they've had the opportunity to go out and sit in the sun when they wanted to, and they can grow things. So look, there's always a positive when you've got a challenge. And I think perhaps you've just very well articulated what this one is, if we want to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
What is that? So look, Bec, I have really loved hearing all about what you've been doing with STREAT, with CRATEFUL. We haven't even talked about moving FEAST yet, so let's give that a crack, because now that's a response to the pandemic, food, having to deal with that, and you've got a collaboration of Victorian food social enterprises. So I'd love to hear about how that came about and the work that you guys have been doing over the past few months.
Yeah, look, Moving FEAST started really with a speed dial that I did to a bunch of social enterprise mates, and Melbourne has a very thriving social enterprise scene, and what I did is just called a bunch of peers and said, look, how are you feeling about this kind of impending time? What is that going to mean for your social enterprise? And it was clear that many of us, particularly those of us in the food system, were going to have a really tough time. So what we did is we built a collaborative project called Moving FEAST, which is at the moment has about 20 food social enterprises collaborating together in a system. And we have anywhere from kind of social enterprise farms and horticulturists through to, hospitality organisations and food retailers and caterers, through to social enterprise logistics and transport organisations, and essentially we've configured all that together in kind of an end-to-end ethical food system. And the first amount of work we've done is really concentrated in food security. There's a lot of food relief activity that we've done. So we've made well in excess of 120,000 ready-made meals for low-income Melburnians. We've made more than 20,000, produce boxes, and really, I guess, probably focused more on kind of different cultural groups in Melbourne who may not be serviced very well by the existing food relief system. Often our food relief system, you kind of take what you get. And there's a lot of kind of giving out of highly processed food. Often access to really fresh produce and nutritious food is an issue. So all of those meals and that produce has been culturally appropriate and diverse. And so we really worked pretty hard. We kept our kitchens open. So even though our kitchens were closing, to our usual customers, we collectively pivoted into making a large amount of meals and produce boxes. But I think what we're equally excited about is that ability to work longer term, to be really thinking about building the food system that we need for Victoria, rather than the kind of crisis food system that we have right now. And the thing that I'm so aware of, I guess, is that the food system is one of the most pivotal systems that we need to use to address catastrophic climate change. So much of our waste and our extra CO2 or equivalent kind of emissions that are going out there is either through the way we use our land, so destroying land, to felling forests to put to be raising more stuff for our meat-based diets. A lot of it is food waste. So the way we are so incredibly wasteful when it comes to food. So all of those things that can be done to start to change, not only household food practices, but also the food industry itself. Sadly, the food industry is the most wasteful of all the industries. Certainly in Victoria, that's the case. I don't know if that's the same across Australia, but I can't imagine it would be very different in the other capital cities, at least. And so we know that it's an incredibly wasteful industry. So we're really interested in what would it look like to really start to do transformation of our food system. that, you know, what does it look like to be doing regenerative farming activity? What does it look like when we build localized, you know, supply chains, rather than buying, you know, oranges from California in the wrong season? So what does it look like when it's seasonal, when it's organic, when it's local, when it's ethical, when it's, you know, the farming practices aren't extractive and doing more damage, but are actually regenerating soil and being part of the solution and capturing more carbon into the soil. So we're really, I guess, excited about what does it look like to be building, you know, the future food system that we need. And once again, like we started this conversation, you know, using the pandemic really as the catalyst to start to make those bigger systemic changes. So, you know, it's only 6 months old, this collaboration, but I feel like we're just getting started, really. There's a really strong appetite to kind of keep this work going and actually saying, you know, what are we dreaming of for 2050? And one of the exciting things is that the food system is the only system that you can address all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals through. It you know, all of us know that you know, food is an absolutely core part of life. So this is a system that touches our lives daily or multiple times daily. And getting back to what you said at the very beginning around, you know, our choices and our you know, our consumption matters the same. You know, the choices, what we put in our mouth has such an enormous impact on planet Earth, not just our own species, but all of those other species too. The decisions that we make around our meals and what we eat can, you know, when you aggregate those decisions, become very, very real in facing kind of what's going to be a very, very tough future as we get hotter and warmer and more carbon.
And I love what you said. It's all about what you do. It's part of the solution. So the system feeds itself. So, and it's almost like a household growing its own garden creates its own ecosystem that, where you learn, you take that out further into the community, and sort of everything sort of feeding into everything else. I think it's a very wise but also timely discussion for us to have, because now with all of the changes, we do need to step up and go, okay, what did my great-grandparents do? Maybe I could sort of go back and start doing that again, because we can't just necessarily rely on, like you said, the food chains coming from California or whatever.
Yeah.
I think also so much healthier just to eat in season anyway, isn't it?
Oh, look, I'm cooking. I've been cooking lunch every day for the family throughout the pandemic, and I'll go. What is it? Probably 6 meters from here to the garden where I'm sitting. So I'm just sitting kind of in the lounge room, and I'll literally go out, you know, in a couple of hours' time, and then just harvest across all of that. And it'll be minutes between that food being harvested in the backyard and it coming here. So, you know, not only is it, you know, you couldn't get it to be fresher than it is, but it's also, obviously there's no transport miles in there. It's turning kind of food miles into food meters. And so that ability, obviously, you know, there's a lot of ticks. You know, yes, I'm getting connectedness to nature. It's all organic food that we're growing out there. It's seasonal. It's got low transport emissions. There's just so many, you know, so many ticks that we can give the planet with that kind of eating, and just knowing that it's not hard. You know, even if you're indoors and you don't have a balcony and you're in an apartment, you can grow, you know, microgreens and sprouts and a whole bunch of stuff in your kitchen. You don't only need to have own, you know, land to be able to do a lot of this stuff as well.
Exactly. I think what I said right at the beginning, it's the blueprint for recovery that you've actually shared with us today. I think it's incredibly wise, and we'll change the way, I guess, the relationship we have with ourselves and our environment. So Bec Scott, what a fantastic chat we've had today. Thank you so much, you very busy woman. I'm going to let you go and make your lunch and harvest it and get back to your enterprises. But I really encourage everyone to check out what Bec is doing. It really is so important for us to change our mindset, especially this time in history. Bec, thank you so much.
Pleasure. And stay safe and sane, and hopefully we get to go interstate soon. So for anyone who out of lockdown can come to Melbourne, we hope that we'll share a meal with you one of these days or months in the future at STREAT.
I love it. Thanks, Bec.
Right. Thanks.